Now, I understand a UFO landed on a farm in Gower this week, and the aliens actually hurt the farmer. Apparently they trod on his corn. Oh, okay, I won't do any more. Okay. Right, tonight we have the pleasure of welcoming Miss Tony Buckingham, who has travelled all the way from Cambridgeshire to be with us this evening. He and his lady wife here. Tony's currently the group chairman of East Anglia UFO Group. When he was 17, he had his own UFO sighting, the details of which I'm sure he'll share with you if you ask him. Anyway, this sighting apparently sparked his interest in the UFO phenomena, and as a result he subscribed to Flying Saucer Review magazine and spent most of his spare time attending a few of the UFO clubs in the UK. And at that time there were quite a few. That was obviously long before the advent of the internet, which has resulted in dwindling numbers and a lot of those clubs closing. Now, eventually Tony, together with other founding members, set up the East Anglia UFO Group, which is one of the foremost groups of its kind in the country. And as is also the case with our club, they have an extensive record of UFO sightings in their area, together with a depository of information about the subject for anyone who's interested. They can access that quite easily if they've got an interest in the subject. Now tonight, Tony is going to share with us some details of interesting sightings that have occurred and been reported in the East Anglia area. So, please give a warm Welsh welcome to Mr. Tony Buckingham.
Thank you for that warm round of sympathy. It's great to be here. We had an easy ride up here. It was really good, a lot better than we thought it would be. I've only ever been here once before in my life, and every person I've met so far has been really lovely. I admire you all, every single one of you, because anyone that can read those road signs we had coming up here, there you got my admiration, you know, but there we are. Unfortunately tonight we're going to have to keep taking the microphone off on 4 occasions, because all of us in our infinite wisdom has forgot to bring a lead that goes from the laptop to the sound doodah over there. So we've got a couple of very short regressions, or parts of regressions, to play that I find quite interesting, and I hope you do too. So hopefully we can get them to play through via putting a microphone in there.
Ladies and gentlemen, and that little grey guy in the corner, the East Anglia UFO Group brings to you the biggest story of mankind.
Well, unfortunately, the presentation is going to be about half as long as it was going to be, because the introduction told you what half of it was. So when I was telling about my my sighting, which happened a long time ago, and things were a lot different then. We're talking about 1974, and do you want to just flick to the next? I'll tell you, I've got the clicker here somewhere. I forgot we've got modern technology now. There we go. Oop, gone by. Right, there we are. In 74, when I got into this, things were a lot different. You just couldn't flick on a computer, as some of you are aware, and find out pretty much all that you want, whether it's false or not. After I had my sighting, I was really struggling to find out information. So I ended up going to the local library, and I found half a dozen books that told me quite a bit there, really. And you go to the local libraries around our way in Cambridgeshire now, and you will never find a UFO book there, not now. But in those days, the village had 6 books, and Ely, the nearest big town, there was about 20-25 books there, and they weren't printing them every other week like you seem to get UFO books coming out now. In the back of one of those, I found out about Flying Saucer Review, as you've just heard, and I subscribed to that. I did have a spell when I got more interested in motorcycles for a while, and I let the subscription falter, and then I resubscribed a bit later. After a couple of divorces, I've lost many of them, but I still have around about 100 Flying Saucer Reviews. But that was the only way you could really find out much information other than the local groups. I was saying to Emlyn earlier, from me there was 5 UFO groups within a 40-mile radius, so there was plenty of UFO groups about, and unfortunately, as we all know, they don't seem to exist anymore. I just want to tell you a few things about the slides that we're putting up here tonight. There are a few which are original, they're our slides, but most of the pictures are there just for illustration purposes only. And I can tell you now that some of them, many of them, come off the internet. But where we can, we talk to the people and we try to reconfigure them slightly and to give them as good an indication of what the objects looked like, and we've had it cleared with the people that we've spoken to try and get it as authentic as possible. But they are there for illustration purposes only. Most of the events that I'm going to be talking about are our own cases, apart from two. One of them belongs to Alan Foster, and I know he's been along here, really nice guy, but it happened right on our doorstep and in the middle of several other sightings that were almost the same. So I haven't nicked it, I'm just putting it here to illustrate, and we've put some extra maps and what have you on. So you might recall that particular story if he told you indeed. Hey, where is it? Hey, look here, look, I've pinched your files here.
I'll say what you say.
Oh, no pressure. And the other one isn't one of ours, but once again, because it's in the middle of a very small area that you'll see on the map in a moment, we thought it was important to put it on. But I've checked with a couple of people that did research it, so hopefully got the facts right, and I hope you'll find them very interesting. We're going to have a breather halfway through, because I need it, and I've been told you guys do as well. And we're going to have a Q&A at the end, and I'm here as long as you need me, so that should be okay. Mainly we're talking a little bit about abductions tonight, although I don't particularly like to use that term, and we're also going to be seeing a lot of cases where orbs have been seen. The cases we're talking about tonight are all pretty small ones, so we've got lots of them. I could have easily put in, I've got another talk that I put on about Rendlesham, the Bentwaters Lake and Neatham Water Beach event, which was quite big. But a lot of people that are into this stuff will have already know all about this stuff, and some of you guys probably know more about Rendlesham than I do. So I'm putting all these small sightings and what have you, but I think you'll still find them interesting. So without further more to do, we'll crack on. Right, just find my little button here. Here we go. So this is the area that we cover, East Anglia, and for those who have been out that way, we haven't got quite as many hills as you, and the hills that we call hills, I don't think they would even register with you guys. But the group is based here at Newmarket, and it's this sort of central area that we're talking about when we talk about most of the cases, apart from one or two this evening. So straight on to the first one. This lady is now a group member. She's about 50 years old, ish. She was 17 years old when she had her sighting, and her father was what was then called a special police constable. I don't know if they call them that now. Excuse me just a moment.
This beer tastes so good.
Oh, that's better. She lived in Newmarket, which is not far from Cambridge. And after her sighting, her father, who was a police special, told her, he said, "You never tell anybody your story." He said, "Because if you do, they'll lock you up and throw away the key. They'll think you're mad." So she never told anybody, apart from her best friend, who is now also a member of the group, because she also had a sighting, which I'll be showing you on here tonight. And I was the third person she told, other than her direct family, of course. And we've got a lot of information which I'll share with you now. But at the time, she worked at Marshall's Airport. I'm sure Alan's well aware of this place. It's on the outskirts of Cambridge, to the it will be the east of Cambridge. So Cambridge is up here somewhere, and she worked in these offices over here. This is the main road out of Cambridge. It looked a lot different then, because there wasn't as many cars about then. When she had her sighting, which we're going to cover right now, I used to travel that road quite regular, and I can assure you that road was jam-packed every single night and every single morning with traffic, as it is now, and it's a dual carriageway now. But that's where she worked, and she would always ring her mum about 20 minutes to 30 minutes when she left school, work, when she would call them and say, I'm going to be home in 20-30 minutes. So they knew what the situation was. So okay, I'm just struggling to find the little buttons on here all the time. Here we go. So I don't know how well you can see that, probably not very well at the back, but just over here is Cambridge, and she lived over here at Newmarket. And she would travel this road home along this checkered line here, and that's where she had her sighting, and that's where it finished there. Now there's a dual carriageway come around here, and it goes all the way around here up to Mildenhall and Thetford and so forth. But in those days it was just a normal trunk road, and it was rammed with cars. So she was travelling home in her Volkswagen Beetle, and her father at the time, when she got this car, fitted a little radio in there. He worked as a mechanic full time, and they had these radios that all the breakdown vehicles had, and they had a spare one. And he said, I'm going to put that in your car, and I'll only be able to pick you up on this certain hill, which, as I said, you wouldn't class it as a hill, but he said, once you get there, I can pick you up, and if you have a problem, give me a shout on this radio, and I'll come and sort you out. So she was travelling along this road, and when she got to here, she noticed that there wasn't any cars, and she found it a little bit odd. And this is the crossroads where she had her sighting. In those days, these trees weren't there. There was a previous lot of trees that came down in that storm many years ago, but the trees were a lot lower than they are now, and not so thick neither. So this is the Swaffham Bullbeck Dullingham crossroads. Cambridge is behind us, and Newmarket is way up there. That road very slowly goes uphill, and is called the 9 Mile Hill, and that's where she would be able to pick her father up if she had a problem. As she got to that crossroad, she looked to the left because something caught her eye, and there's really bright lights were on, and she thought just for a second or two it was a tractor, because it's just starting to, the light was just starting to break and what have you, but it's still daylight essentially. And then she soon realised it wasn't a tractor, it was something a bit different. And this is where it was. It was situated where this ring is just here, and we went out there last year, and she had to go out there and show me exactly where it was. Unfortunately, there's racehorses in there. Now, I don't know how much you guys know about racehorses, but in Newmarket, one racehorse is worth the life of about 20 humans. You just don't mess around with them, you don't frighten them, and they will prosecute anybody who messes around with them. And I was begging her not to go in the field, but she had to go and show me. Quite ironically, and it could have been a fairy ring or something, who knows, but it's strange it was in the exact same place and the same diameter. But you can't see it in the picture very well, but around here the grass was all a little bit higher than it was inside and outside, which was a little bit odd. But when she spotted this white light, she said it immediately rose up into the air, very similar to this. That's the best image we could get that looked anything like it, but the next image is better still. It rose straight up in the air and moved into position almost instantly, very low over her car. She said it seemed like it was anything from 6 feet to 30 feet above the car. It completely covered the car, she could see it either side, and it drowned her in white light. That's more like what it looked like. But when I showed her the picture, and we adapted it to look a bit like hers with the Volkswagen, etc., she said, but the white, it was more intense than that. You could almost not see through it. She thought she was going to crash the car. She was still travelling along the road. She tried contacting her father, but the two-way radio was just static where she could normally pick him up. She kept trying, it was just static all the way home. She kept trying him on and off anyway. She went faster and faster, as fast as those things will go anyway. And she said, as she kept going faster, this thing just sat there as if it was stuck to the roof of her car almost. She even tried slowing right down, almost to a stop, hoping it would just whiz off. But once again, it slowed down when she slowed down. So she carried on building her speed up again, and after the 9 Mile Hill, so there's a 9 mile stretch she had travelled with this thing over top, and she said, I can still remember there's no cars whatsoever. And as I said earlier, I used to travel that road, and there was never an occasion when there wasn't lots of cars. Anyway, she gets to this very large roundabout, and you perhaps can't can't see it there, but in the middle there's this, it doesn't look very big there, but it's a huge statue of a racehorse. And the Newmarket racecourses, and there's 2 or 3 of them, they're all over the left-hand side here. And that's what used to be the main A11, but it's now bypassed, as I indicated earlier. Anyway, she said she went round this roundabout. She was going so fast that she thought she was going to topple the car over. And she went round there. She was hoping there was going to be police around. And as you'll notice, just here, there's a little row of houses. And she considered stopping and going round, but she was afraid. She wanted to get back to Newmarket, which from there is about another 2 miles. So she goes, turns left just there, and Newmarket is down a long straight bit of road down there, and it's just the other end of the straight bit of road. She's going along the straight bit of road. This thing stayed with her all the way. So we're talking about probably a 15 to 20 minute journey, something like that. As you come into Newmarket, the gate for one of the race courses is just over here on the left. Just here is a cemetery. And this is the beginning of Newmarket, and you go down a hill there into the town proper. It's only a small town, really. And the other side, you go up a hill again. So Newmarket sits in a low. And just the other side of Newmarket, there's a bit more of a hill than I've been mentioning earlier. But and you can, if you turn round when you go up there, you can see over the town of Newmarket. Anyway, she lives just down the bottom of this hill, turns right, and where there's some traffic lights. And that's where she lives. But she notices as she's coming down here that this thing seems, she didn't see it, but the light seemed to go off to the right across this graveyard, the cemetery here. But what she did notice, that there's still no cars anywhere. And none of these street lights were on. They were different street lights then. This is obviously a modern photograph. But what was even more bizarre, there's no lights on in the town. And she thought that there was an electric cut. So she gets to the bottom of the hill where the traffic lights are, looks to her right, and when she turns right, this is pretty much what she sees. This is the road. The saucer's sitting there now, and it's just swaying, that sort of motion. She says, it's almost like it's dancing for me. She lives just around the corner. You get to the bottom of this road, you hang a left, and then another left, and that's where she lived at the time. When she pulled up, she said everything seemed to go strange, and she said her father come running out of the house. And he shook her and said, where have you been? You're 2 hours late getting home. So a journey that should have took 20 minutes to half an hour max took her 2.5 hours. And that's when she told him the story, and that's when he said, you never tell anybody about this because they'll lock you up. She's a lovely lady. She's this incident and 1 or 2 other things has ruined her mentally. She's in quite a state, and we're trying to help her through it the best we can, but we don't even know the answers. I have a lot of pet theories. As many of you that have been on this subject for some time will have your own theories. You'll join dots together, and we've probably all got different ideas of what's going on. I have my theories, and I do believe a lot of sightings, such as this one, they're picking you up and they're possibly dropping you off at what appears to be the same time or another time, and everything in the middle is a screen memory, or a false memory if you like. And personally I believe that when she saw the light, from that moment on-ish, until she saw the saucer here, I think was all a screen memory, and I think that's why. I mean, we're trying to persuade her to do some regression, but she's too afraid to do it. That's the end of that story. So that's all in Newmarket, well, Cambridge to Newmarket. So this is where most of the sightings are we're talking about. So they're gathered around a little cluster here, with a couple down here, one here, and another one over here. Now this one, you'll know all about this, because the introduction he told you most of it. This is my sighting. I live in a small village on the outskirts I live on the outskirts of a small village called LITTLEPORT. It's about 20 miles from Cambridge, and at the time when I lived in this bungalow, there was nothing behind the bungalow. There's a housing estate now, and indeed a bypass further across. But at the time, this is pretty much what you saw across outside. It's just flat lands. It used to be like peat beds and marshland a couple of hundred years ago, and they drained it all. So it's dead flat, beautiful skies, and when it's clear, you can see beautiful stars and what have you. It's really fantastic. So that's where I lived. It was beside the road, the A1101, and only in the distance, and it was a long way in the distance, as you'll see in a moment, there was 2 houses. There are more now, but there was only 2 houses for around about 20 miles. I'll give you a bit of an indication. Right, so we're down here. I lived at the bottom of the arrow there. That bypass wasn't there then. And from there to up here, where the nearest houses are, is about 20 miles. So there's nothing. It was pitch dark at night times. That isn't the UFO. I was alone in my house that night. My parents had gone out with my brother and my sister, and I had instructions that night. It was a freezing cold night. Don't let the boiler go out. We had this coke or anthracite or whatever it was called we used to put on the boiler, and I was sitting there with my feet up watching TV and forgot all about the fire until about half an hour before they was due home. Suddenly I remembered, I rushed out, and we got some red embers in the fire, so it was both hands to the pump. I went outside to fill up out of a chute like this, and as I bent down to start filling this up, my ears went completely, well, I wouldn't say I was deaf, but it was very muted, very much like when you're landing in an aircraft. They went like that, and I just stood up to go like that to clear my ears. But all the hairs on my body felt somehow electrified. I can't really describe it any better than that. But as I looked up, that's when I saw, that's not it actually. I saw the object that I saw. My son bought me this book for a Christmas present about, I don't know, 6 years ago, I would imagine. And I was flipping through it on Christmas Day rather than watch the Queen. And there was a page on there that had a UFO. It's like the one I saw. And I called him over. I said, "There's my UFO." He said, "Oh, it was a bit like that, was it?" I said, "No, that is it." I'll show you a picture of it in a second. The thing that I saw, I described as a dirty golden colour. I said if I held my arm out like this, it was about the size of my fist, so it was quite close. Well, depending on, it's a job to scale really, isn't it? It was completely silent. I said I can't swear that the thing was spinning round, but it appeared to be spinning round. But I distinctly remember what looked like, and they probably wasn't, windows at the top of it, sort of rectangular things going round. And I also remember seeing 2 what I described as ping pong balls on the top of it, and I thought there was another one, but I couldn't swear on that. So that's what the picture is in the Haunted Skies book, and I'd never seen that picture anywhere in all those years. I started in '74, and this is, like I say, only a handful of years ago, but I've never seen that image anywhere before. And it's pretty well, I mean, we've coloured it a little bit here. You're wobbling the projector. Just thought I'd let you know. But it's got the bobbles on top. And that's exactly how it was. And like I say, it was the size of a fist as I held it out like that. I remember considering, just for a split second, shall I run in and try and get a camera? And remember, in those days, we didn't have mobile phones. Hadn't got a clue where the camera was, if there was a film in it or not. I did look over to my right. The moon was there. It was silvery colour. There's nothing in the distance to reflect. There's no water to reflect an image up or anything like that. I've spent many years trying to find out what it was. I contacted the Air Force, I contacted Marshall's Airport and various other organisations. And as the usual case, they all said no, nothing to do with them. I had about 6 weeks, possibly a bit longer, telling all my friends about it, and then I spent the next 10, 20 years regretting telling them about it. In those days it was a lot worse than now, and I was considered a bit of a Fruit Loop in those days. That's the only standard UFO type sighting I've ever had. I've never had any more since, but I have had several other strange things which may or may not be related. I had had a spell over about 6 years being harassed by black helicopters. I don't know my helicopters very well. If we get anybody who wanted to know about a UFO sighting with helicopters. We have somebody in the group who knows all about helicopters, and he advises. But it looked like an Apache, but I've been told since it wouldn't be an Apache, it was probably another one which I've forgotten. But anyway, I've had lots of problems with these. It started about 15 mile away from home one day on not a deserted road, but a very quiet road. And I turned around this bit of a bend in the road, and this thing came right down in front of me, about 30 feet off the ground, and it went backwards as I was going toward it. I pulled down a small country lane, and this thing followed me just over my right shoulder. And I've had lots of other instances like that. One indeed, when I wasn't even at home, and my son and a close friend was there, and they saw this helicopter basically just going over my house, turning around, keep going backwards and forwards over my house. Lots more to tell you about if you want to know, but we'll do that Q&A if you want to know. But I've also had a spell of seeing these strange fog-like apparitions. Most of them are relatively small, about the size of a football. It's a fleeting glimpse, and it just seems to go. But one in particular, I was in a hotel room, and it seemed to come out the bathroom wall. It was like a squashed donut, and it came out of the bathroom wall, and I hadn't just had a bath, by the way, and it went across the room pretty quickly, and it went through the other wall. And I've got a picture here, which is, it's not the one, but it's almost the same, although it's laying a bit more horizontal, this one. But as near as heck, that's what I saw, and it just came through the wall. Whether it's related or not, I don't know. I was talking to Susie Hanson a few weeks ago. We was having a Skype chat, because as most of you know, I guess she lives in New Zealand, so we was having a chat on Skype, and I was telling her about a couple of times when I've seen these hieroglyphs. When I closed my eyes on a couple of occasions, you know, the old-fashioned slot machines where you pull the handle and the wheels go around, a bit like that, but they were coming around so quick you couldn't actually register any one in particular. But there was rows of them, very similar to this, just flashing round. And she said at the time, and I've had it said twice more, you've had a download. Whether I have or not, I don't know. But something I have seen, which, now here again, this is off the internet. And I've seen these type of people for most of my life, and lots of them too. And I just assumed they was albinos. Now, Kaz down here has worked in the National Health Service all her life, and she's seen lots and lots of people. And I said to her one day, how many albinos have you seen when you've been working in hospitals, you know, people that look like this? And she gave quite a bit of thought to it, and she said, I don't actually recall ever seeing any. And I see them all the time. I've seen them in bus stops. I was in a bar with my son in Mainz in Germany, and there was 3 of them at the bar, and one was staring at me all the time. And I said to my son afterwards, when we left, did you see them people? And he said, no, he didn't even see them. So I could be hallucinating. And I will tell you one more story. I was walking with Kaz, we was flyering in Newmarket actually for the group. And this woman came walking toward us with what looked like a daughter. It was about that high, holding a hand. But as I got close to her, the daughter looked ashen looking, white hair, really dark eyes, and all the clothes even seemed, you know, pale. And I did notice she wasn't actually holding her mother's hand, even though she was holding her hand up like this. I walked past, and as I walked past, I turned around to have a double check of this girl, and she was turning around looking at me at the same time. And if I'd thought rationally and like that, I would have chased after him and made some excuse to talk to the woman and her child. But I actually said to Karen, did you see that little girl? And she said no, but she hadn't seen the woman either, in fairness. So I looked round, and by now the woman had gone round the corner. So that was a bit of a shame, because, you know, somebody else could have possibly witnessed this. So anyway, I've seen lots of these people. I ain't saying who they are or what they are, but I did talk to a guy who did give me a bit of advice once, and I do respect him, but here again, during Q&A, if you want to know a bit more, I'll be quite happy to do so. And that's a picture of Littleport on a very foggy day. Ah, here we go, there is something else. Sorry about that. I had a spell for about 3 years having an awful amount of nightmares in the main. Not all greys, in actual fact very few were greys, very weird creatures, and they would be some sort of apocalypse, and we're trying to run away from these sort of nightmares many people have, and I think and live and breathe this rubbish anyway, so it's a good chance that I'm going to be dreaming about it. On this particular occasion, I was dreaming that I was laying on this slab, and there were some stereotypical greys, like the little guy here, around here. You just make out the heads, you could see some medical equipment, all the stuff you see in the movies. It was a dream. But what was strange was, I recall a few very long fingers picking my arm up until it got to about here, and almost instantly I had a terrific pain just here, and it woke me up. Oh, sorry about that. It woke me up, and I said, oh, I just had another one of my nightmares, and I told her about the dream. I said, this is what happened. And she said, oh my God, look at your wrist. And this was taken some time after, but there was blood actually running down my wrist from 5 puncture marks, which were an exact circle around there, as you see just there. It's scabbing over now, but you can still just about make out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But they were bleeding at the time, and this picture was taken, healed so quickly. Within 2 days there was no scabs, but you could just make out the marks, and within a week there was nothing there. But that was taken, I would think, 10-15 minutes after I woke up from the dream. I ain't saying what happened. I mean, I've had people say, oh, it was an insect bite. Some people said, oh, it's when you had your jab when you was a kid, and all this sort of thing. You know, the little thing, I think they used to put it in here or here somewhere, didn't they? But I did contact some people that were into their insects, and they said they've never seen an insect bite that big and what looks like that in this country. And I pretty much left it at that, really. But all I would say, if it was an insect bite, it's a pretty clever insect, because he knew just when to bite me when my arm was lifted up, and yeah, I just find it a little bit odd. I just thought I'd share that with you. So we'll go on to another sighting now. This is in Cottenham, which is a small village just north of Cambridgeshire. It's a satellite, it's now a dormitory village of Cambridge. I mean, it's just a little farming village originally, but now it's where all the toffs go to live and spend all their money. And this particular sighting was late on a November evening, 4 o'clock. It was just starting to lose the light at that time. It was a blue sky, but clouds were just starting to form. And the guy here wants his surname kept out of it all. His name's Paul, 48 years old. He was travelling home from work on a building site in Cambridge. And he would have, Cambridge is in the distance there, and just to the left outside shot of the picture there, by about a quarter of a mile is the edge of the village. And on the edge of the village there's a church, which we'll see in a moment. So he's travelling from there, and he's travelling down this way. So just to give you an idea where he actually lived, so he was working in Cambridge here, he travelled on, where the heck are we? There we are, he's travelled down that road through Histon, Cottenham, and on this really long road up here, and he lived over here somewhere. About 20 miles away. Oh, there we go. And this is where he lived. Now this town we're going to hear a lot of later on, because there's 3 more sightings in this town. He lives in a small fenland town called Chatteris, and as I said, it's about 20 miles from Cottenham. No, I messed it up, there we go. Sorry about that. As he approached the church in Cottenham, and as I said, it's on the edge of the village, he just happened to look up, glance to the left up in the sky, and we made this picture, by the way. But we cleared it with him. He said that's just what it looked like. He looked up and he thought he saw 8 parachutes. In case you can't see them, there's those little dots there. 8 parachutes, because he was aware, he didn't come from the area, but he was aware that the whole of East Anglia was riddled with airfields or old abandoned airfields, because during the Second World War it was like one big airfield. And he was aware that there was an airfield over that way, but he didn't know that it had been decommissioned years earlier. But none the more for that, that's where what he thought were parachutes. But almost in an instant, one of them, he said it almost didn't fly down. 1 minute it was there, and almost in an instant it was down really close. And he slowed down, and as he slowed down to have a look at it, he said, it's as if it saw me, and it shot back up into the cloud, bellowing smoke out the back of it. He said, initially, he said, I thought it was on fire. He said, but the more I thought about it, he said, it looked just like the cloud. He said, it was almost as if it was camouflage. So he glanced across, and although we've got them showing in this picture here, he glanced across, he said, and all the other, what he thought was parachutes, by then had disappeared. Other than his son, he didn't tell anybody else until several years later when he recounted his story to me. And for those here that go and investigate these stories, you get a bit of an idea if people are, you know, just spinning you a line and what have you. Some people you talk to, and this guy among Deborah, the first one I mentioned, this guy, there's terror in sometimes in their faces, and this guy really showed, you know, to me, it was genuine. You know, his voice was shaking. He got quite emotional over it all. So we'll go on to another one, and this one's at Long Melford. Now this one is the first of the sightings that doesn't belong to me, but some of the things that happen, and I'll mention them, happen later on to some people we have spoke about. So Long Melford's just down here. And there's a main road, although it's a terrible road, travels here, goes off onto Cambridge. Haverhill is somewhere about there. And once again, it's a fairly busy road. This is the lady who had the, she was a young teenager at the time. She was visiting some friends in Cambridge with her, and she had a boyfriend with her. And when she left Long Melford, she noticed this light that seemed to be zigzagging in the distance around. And she was on this road, the A1092, it's declared a Haverhill road. And like I said, it zipped over, started zipping over the car 2 or 3 times. And she said it did seem as though it was intelligently controlled, but, you know, only because of the way it was moving. Then it ended up matching the speed and running beside them for quite a while, and she described it as being a bright egg-shaped light. She guesstimated it was about 50 to 100 feet away, and as I said, she thought it was intelligently controlled. But one time when it had done a bit of a circuit, because it kept moving backwards and forwards, it all of a sudden appeared to look like a horseshoe. And it had lights all the way around the edge underneath, and it was about the size of a helicopter. That's how she described it. No sound whatsoever, but her boyfriend was already panicking, and it just got worse. The engine failed, and she said it was almost as though it had run out of petrol, and it just chugged and all the lights went out. And they sort of agreed to get out the car while he had a look to see if there's any wires come off, and she would keep an eye on this thing because it was still there. 4 hours later, eventually they found out it was 4 hours later, they seemed to think, well, what's going on? And they sort of was half waking up, but they both felt dizzy. She had a small gash on her neck, and she felt a little bit ill, a bit nauseous. But she said later on she remembered an experience that she described as being too terrifying to believe or recount, really. She recalls being on a Perspex-type pedestal. She was paralysed, she couldn't scream, and she recalls grey figures conducting experiments on her, what she calls experiments. There's a bit I want you to try and remember. She, this mark on her back, this isn't the mark from her, this is off the internet, but apparently it's supposed to be very similar to what she had, and we've got another case with a genuine photograph of a lady's back with this mark on the back. And when I showed them this picture, they said, my God, that's exactly what we had, or she had, a friend, and it was further up near the neck, but it was exactly the same. And we'll go over that later on. In her sleep, she was drawing pictures by dotting paper with a pen, and she doesn't recall doing them, so she's making alien eyes, strange formulas, and like I said, she said she had no recollection of doing these. Her symptoms worsened, she still felt ill, she got terrible headaches, and she was had them for a long time. The couple split not soon after. He couldn't face her, apparently, because it just reminded him of this night, and it was something he wanted to forget. Many years later, she moved away. She lives in Lincolnshire now. I know where she is. I can talk to her any time, but John Hanson has helped me with researching this, and he did interview her, so he's given me a lot of information, so hopefully it's pretty well near correct. She did see an advert for a local UFO group, and they was telling a story about some UFOs that they'd been researching. She contacted them, and they arranged a hypnotic regression session for her. So they rigged it all up, they brought along a skeptic, somebody to video it, they took everybody along, and when they was trying to take her down, take her under, I don't know how many here have had regression, but everybody we've ever used, they seem to take anything from 5 minutes to 30 minutes to bring people down to a level when they're really, really relaxed. Well, during that process, this beam of light appeared in the room, allegedly, and there's no record of where the light came from. So I do intend to talk to this lady, Ross, and find out where that came from. But at the same time, the video recorders, the cameras, stopped working, and they couldn't get them to work anymore. But the skeptic observer, who was sitting on an armchair, was pinned with some force, the text said, on his arms, which left marks, indeed, on his arms. And all the clocks stopped in the house at that time as well. What it all is, I have no answers, but I mainly wanted to show you this because it's mainly the V on the back of the neck that I wanted you to see. But later on, she was looking through the local papers, and she saw a story in there that was from some people that saw the same lights on the same night on the same road that she saw, and this was their story. So still no conclusion, but at least she knew she wasn't the only one, and she wasn't as mad as she thought she was. Excuse me one moment. Right. We're going to move to DUXFORD now, which is just south of Cambridge. Just there, Cambridge is up here. And DUXFORD is famous now for the War Museum that they have there, and indeed a lot of the archives are kept there across the road. But they've all Second World War there. I think they've got a Concorde there, they've got lots of stuff there. It's a really interesting place. And the runway finishes literally right beside the M11 motorway. Indeed, there has been a couple of airplane crashes, and one of them landed on the motorway, and another one was just got over the motorway, so it's that close. This particular occasion had a mother with her son. I've spoken to them both, and I've spoken to them separately, and they gave me the exact same story. They were travelling from Cambridge down here to Southend, and they had two sightings basically. There was one at DUXFORD and another one down here on the way to Southend. So it's the M25 going around here. Strangely, during the conversation, and I never dwelled on it, but I said at the time, was there many cars on the road? And he said, you know, I've not really thought about it. He said, but now I come to think about it, he said, after we saw that, whatever it was, he said, I don't recall any cars. He said, but there must have been, I just don't recall. So make of that what you will. This is something we've fabricated, but it gives you a bit of an idea. So we've got DUXFORD Airfield just here. Well, it's just behind here, actually. And as they was travelling down here, they saw 6 lights in the sky over here. Now, if you know the area relatively well, you'll know that over in this area is where all the planes are landing at Stansted Airport. But it's about 20 miles away, and I put this to him. He said, there's no way were they aeroplanes at Stansted. He said, these were really close. And they were dancing around, and he used some terminology which you'll hear again a little bit later on, and that's another one of those synchronicities. I just think to myself, you know, there's sometimes you know, coincidences possibly aren't just coincidences. But he said they were dancing around, he said, almost like they're weaving out in and out of one another. He said, and at some point he said some of them had what looked like a white light or a silvery light coming down from underneath them. He pretty much left it at that. But that was quite interesting because we've had other people talking about that as well, which you'll see a bit later on. So they travel the rest of the journey. He can't remember seeing any cars. His mother can't remember seeing any cars, but they both said separately there must have been. We were just probably talking about those red lights. And they've left the M25 now, and they're on that awful road, the A127. Anybody who's been down there will know what I'm talking about. And suddenly there was a lot of light appeared above the car. They looked up, and here again they both said there was, I think they said 6 discs flying over the car, very, very low, and they seemed to be circling the car. They pulled over, and this is pretty much what they saw. They said it had no noise, it was silver grey in colour, and there was lots of multicoloured lights around the edge and underneath. Whoop, sorry about that. There we go, back again. And then they said as quick as they arrived, because it was almost as if they clicked on, they clicked off, and it was gone. They looked around, they'd pulled over in a gateway by now, and they was looking around and they just couldn't see them, and they carried on their journey. I asked them, do you recall if there was any, if the journey took longer than it should have been? All these little things that we would probably ask, and they didn't recall anything, anything more. So that's basically the end of the story, and it just ran dry after that. So going back to Newmarket, this is the lady. She's the friend of the person who was on here for a start, Deborah. And they got together because they worked in the same sort of business. And when they're sharing the story, well, Gwen was telling Deborah her story, and Deborah said, well, I've got a story that's very similar. She said, but I've not told anybody outside of my family from that day to this. And that's the story I told you earlier. But Gwen has an interesting story, and this time she's got a friend with her who confirmed the whole story. So we'll go through that. So if you go through the centre of town, Newmarket, where we went earlier, the other side, you actually go up a bit of a hill again. I told you about that. This is a hill out our way, right? So it doesn't look much of a hill, but once you get up the top there and you turn round, that's where it's like all court and couples go up there, because you can see right over the town of Newmarket, and you can see the other side where that other UFO was seen. This particular night, Gwen was 17, and she was driving around the town. They'd both just got a driving licence, and she had a friend with her, and she went down this road, which is called Moulton Road. So she travelled up along there. Between those trees, there's a cottage there, and a little bit further on, there's a gateway. They decided to stop and have a cigarette before going home, because they didn't really want to go home. This is the gateway they stopped in. The hedge was about half the height it is now. Now if you turn in there, there's a big car park in there, and there's a viewing platform to view the racehorses doing the training. But in those days it was just this gateway, and there's very few people go up there. That's why court and couples use it. So they reversed back in here. There's a small village over here called Moulton, and it was over there, while they're having their cigarette and talking, well, one of them's having a cigarette, the other one didn't smoke, this is what they saw. Now I have to come up front and say, once again, they're now looking over what would be Mildenhall Air Base, which is an American air base, logistics base, but there's other stuff going on there. It's literally about 5 miles away, and it's looking directly toward that. The strange thing is, and here again, I've made no conclusions to all this, but there seems to be a lot of orb activity around that air base, and just down the road at Lakenheath, which is another American air base. This is why I pinched Alan's story, because it's, as the crow flies, where this happened is about 2 miles from where Alan's story happened. So anyway, she said we was watching this thing, he sort of seemed to be bobbing around. That was joined by one, another, and then another. And she said they were dancing. It looked like they was putting on a show. Now here again, for those who look a lot into aircraft and know how our aircraft act, I live in the flight path of Mildenhall. And when these big planes are coming towards you, you've got the white light and the coloured lights, they look almost like they're standing still for ages. They don't look like they're moving. And when they bank over, these lights almost appear as though they're tumbling. But I'm pretty sure this wasn't what she saw then. I've actually shown her that. She said nothing like that. She said these were dancing. She said almost like they're playing tag, I think she described it. 5 or 6 of them. She said they were sort of orangey red colour. And here, I guess she said it looked like they were playing tag. All of a sudden, just one of them leapt forward. She said it almost looked like we couldn't see it move. It was there, and then it was in front of us, and landed in the field opposite where she assumed it landed, in the field, the other side of that hedge. She opened a car door. She was a bit showing off a little bit in front of a friend, and I'm going to have a look, and a friend was saying, get back in, get back in. And when the door opened and the light went on, almost at that time, this is how she recalls it, there's this white light that's in the rough shape of a flying saucer. Now, she's had a look at this picture. She said it's the same, but there was a lot more light. She said it wasn't so well defined as that. That was the best we could get off them now, I'm afraid. No noise, no smell. When she came round, they felt a bit bemused what's going on, because it flew over the car, and then almost in an instant it was in pitch blackness. And she said, what's just gone on? She said, did you see what I just see? And they was talking about it. Anyway, they got a bit freaked out, and bizarrely they took a different route home. They turned right to go to that village Moulton in a big U-shape to go home, which puts about 10 minutes to your journey. And they don't know why they went that way, because it's not the logical way. But as they got into Newmarket, and in the olden days when I was a youngster, all around that area was like living in America. There was American cars everywhere. Now when they come over, there's 3 air bases, Mildenhall, Lakenheath and Feltwell just down the road. Now when these Americans come over, most of the time they just buy European cars, because it costs so much to ship them over and so much hassle and what have you. They just buy European cars and dump them at the end of the period they're over here. But they did notice this huge black American car behind them, and there's 2 people in there. And when they stopped at Gwen's, this car stopped further up the road. They ran in because they was freaked out by it all, and when they were looked out later on, it had gone. But bizarrely, when they got back, they realised that they was 2 hours later than they should have been, and they had no account for that. Once again, she never told anybody about this for years and years, until she saw that we had our group in Newmarket in the local newspaper. She came along, and that's when she told me the story. She told me the story, and for about a year, her friend, who now lives in Scotland, wouldn't talk to us about the incident at all. She said, I don't want to talk about it, and it freaked her out. Gwen tried talking to her, and she said, I just want to forget that. She said, it scares me too much. Anyway, to cut a long story short, eventually we persuaded her to talk to me. She told me the exact same story, apart from a couple of little nuances which weren't quite the same. But basically, she underlined everything that Gwen had told me, and she said that's exactly how it was. So once again, you make of it what you will. We've got a lady that lives about 50 miles away who does hypnotic regression. She's really good. I wouldn't say she never asks leading questions, but she's very sympathetic towards us. She knows how important it is not to ask leading questions and to steer people down a certain way. She's pretty good, and we use her quite a bit. And we have got a regression now. Now, the regression lasted for over 2 periods for about 4 hours in total. But we've got, you'll be pleased to know, about a minute. But it's an interesting bit, and if you can try and remember the details in there, because bear in mind, Gwen has never told anybody about this. We've got another lady further on who, with her 2 daughters, had almost exact same experience, and it's the details that she says is exactly the same as the one you're going to hear a bit later. Now, unfortunately now, hold on a sec. Yep, we are next. Unfortunately, I've got to do this thingy with the microphone again, and you might not be able to hear it, so my apologies if you don't. Because Gwen does mumble a bit. Saying that, so does the other person. Right, bear with me.
I'm limp, and drag through the roof of the car.
And you drag through the roof, okay. What do you notice as you're being
White
pulled?
light.
There's a white light. Can you describe
Just bright
what it
white.
looks like? And it's bright and white. Okay. Gone through the top of the roof and up towards like there's people. What do they look like? Can you look? You can really see them now. They're appearing around you.
There are all loads.
What do they look like?
Shadows. Really skinny arms.
Skinny arms. Okay.
Bulbous head.
Bulbous.
Dark eyes.
Just have a look around the room. See if you notice anything about the room that you are in. What does it look like?
It's just white.
It's white?
Yeah. Well, Lucy's next to me.
Okay, Lucy's next to you. Okay. What's happening to Lucy right now?
Just looking at her. She's on the table. I'm on a table.
What do they say?
They don't say anything.
Okay, what do they impress on you? What's their method of communication to you? On the head? Yeah, telepathy. Okay. So what do they impress upon you?
Got long fingers.
Long fingers. Okay. They can impress this upon you now. What do they say?
They want my eggs.
They want your eggs.
Yeah, I have to say I was and still am a little bit sceptical of regression. But during the course of doing it all, I'll just move off here because I know I upset some people. She was laying on the bed naked, by the way, so that's where we put it in. But I had a regression because of mine. I wanted to know more, and I said some stuff that, and here again, I don't mind telling you in the Q&A if you want to know. I said some stuff that I couldn't possibly know that was going to happen in the future, and it happened just weeks later, and you couldn't make the stuff up. So if you want to know, I'll be pleased to tell you later on. So it took me from somebody who was totally sceptical on regression to somebody who, you know, I'll give it a fair crack. And when you hear what the next person talks about a little bit later, it's almost identical. Right, so that was Gwen's experience, Newmarket. She went up that hill, and Emlyn a little while ago, over here somewhere, and Mike over here, came and did us a talk kindly a couple of months ago at our little hut, and we're just basically there. So if you'd have just walked across the field, that's exactly where they were. There's a big field and there's a bit of a hill over there. That's where they were. So on that night, they went here, that there, and across here, and back to Newmarket that way, when all they needed to have done was gone down there. Break time. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we've got about the same duration this time as we just had. And the kind gentleman over there we just had a chat about helicopters, my black helicopters, if you recall. We discovered they were Cobras or Cobras helicopters. That's what I saw, and I just couldn't remember the name of it, so thanks for that. Right, this could be Alan's. I'm hating this bit. No, it's not. These are some orbs that come off the internet that were photographed just outside Mildenhall again. Just shoved it up there just to show you there's a lot of orbs. We had a lady contact us just the other day, and she had an orb she took a photograph of literally over the base, and she said it was just bobbing up and down. People must know this is happening, but what they are, I don't know. Right, here's some orbs that we've took off the internet, and I've showed to some of the people that are talking about orbs a lot in the next half, and they said it's almost identical to what they've seen. But the reason I put it on here is because if you look underneath some of them, there's the flashes that guy was talking about who saw the orbs earlier on down the M11, and I showed him this footage, and he said that's exactly what it was like, apart from they were dancing around, but with these little flashes underneath. So here we go. There is some sound. It's not very loud. I'm not going to take the microphone over because it's just a bit of music, really. Only lasts about 30 seconds. But if you look underneath some of them, you will see little flashes, and I mean what they are I don't know, but we've had a few people talk about these flashes underneath now, and strangely, when I do the research either on the internet or some of the books, magazines, nobody seems to mention these flashes, yet the local people who talk to me about it have all got these flashes. So I don't know.
Separate lights, or do you think they join into a...
Well, this I don't know. I pulled it off the internet because these people were talking about the flashes underneath, and I saw that, and I thought, well, that looks pretty much...
running in the same...
Well, they're certainly not all like it, as you'll see in a minute. Well, it started off as a triangle, then it went to a long bar and shot off, but and a lot of them are singular ones we're showing on here tonight. This is probably Alan's. Good likeness. I'll give you the credit here, no pressure on this one. So it's another car chase theme. We were just talking in the break actually and about how the saucer or object or what it was seemed to be glued to the top of the car. And it seems to happen a lot. I've read a lot about it from these sort of sightings all over the world, as I'm sure some of you have, but certainly some of them that I've investigated have got the exact same story, and this one of Alan's is no different. But to give you a bit of an idea where it's all happening, there's a couple in the car, an off-duty female police officer and a partner travelling home from Suffolk, I believe, on the way to London, South London, I think, on the A11, and I think it was about 11 p.m. Orientation, there's Mildenhall itself, and you can just make out, for those close enough, there's the actual airbase, so you can just make out the runways there. Lakenheath is that close, and I've been told from more than one source, and some of them are military people, that there is like a motorway system that goes underneath the ground between the two air bases. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. Just up out here, out of shot of the picture, is RAF Feltwell, another American base, and I think they're mainly into listening into radio traffic and stuff. They've got big fiberglass domes all over it and what have you. But the place has always been steeped in sort of secret history and also flying saucers. Just over here, down here, there's an air base there. Well, it's not actually an air base, it's an RAF base, but it's no aircraft there. But just behind it is now an industrial estate, but that's where they used to make all the nuclear warheads. And it's a really interesting place to go and visit. And you'd never know it was there. That was all about this area. Down here's Newmarket that we spoke about earlier. But this particular incident happened between this big roundabout at Mildenhall as they're travelling down the A11 going back home toward London. And it's more especially around this area here. I realise that most of you don't know, but it's funny, I've had a couple of people already say, oh, I know these areas really well. This is where it happened. I'm going to show you a daylight shot to give you an idea of where it all is. But as they was travelling up this road going that direction, heading south, they saw these left on the left what they thought were a laser light show, and they soon realised that the lights were actually coming from above rather than going up. Here's the road in the daylight. There's a little lay-by there, and just round the corner, I don't know, about half a mile, something like that, there's a flyover bridge. And these lights were all just up here. So they pulled over and stopped the engine in the lay-by to get a better look at this, and quite quickly the object seemed to be directly over the car, almost as if it's stuck again over top of the car. The car had a sunroof, and when they looked up, it was very close, just as we've already heard earlier. And once again, this is a picture off the internet, but just to demonstrate what it could have looked like. They said it was around 30 feet across. She said she could see the lights and there was no sound or smell. After a short while, they both felt afraid and also nauseous, which I've heard a lot in these sort of cases. They started the car and sped off onto the dual carriageway as fast as possible. All the time the saucer stayed directly over the car as if stuck to it. Here's the bridge just further round on the A11, and they were fast approaching 100 miles an hour. The craft was so low they thought it would crash into this bridge just here. But when they got up to this bridge, the thing seemed to morph and sort of go round, just sort of, I don't know if it looked something like that thing in Star Trek. That's how I imagine it. But how it looked, I don't know. But Alan can probably tell you more. But it morphed around the bridge and came out the other side and repositioned itself over the car again. Not far along the road, a couple came upon some roadworks, bollards and lights, etc. At this point, the UFO sped away. The couple arrived home very late. I have no record whether they lost any time or not. Once again, perhaps Alan knows that bit, but I don't. They're tired, exhausted. The next morning, though, the car wouldn't start. The battery was flat. It needed to be pushed off. Same thing happened after work that evening. So they took the car into a garage and had the battery tested when it was found to be dead. In fact, there's no reading whatsoever was given. It's essentially fried, I guess. And that's pretty much the end of the story. I mean, as far as what I've got. Alan might have some other details, but that's what I've got there. Right, we're going on to Littleport now. Once again, this is where I used to, well, I still do live. I live on the outskirts of the village now. And it seems to be a lot of UFO activity, as you can see by all the little markers, but there's a lot more. I've just put some of the more recent ones on here. This is 1999, and this is the road, the A1101 from Mildenhall to Littleport. Now in the Fens, because there are no hills, everything is dead flat, the roads are flat and really, really straight. And this road is no different. From here to Littleport, which you can't see there, but you will see the lights in a minute, that's about 4 miles from here over to there. And Ely, the cathedral city of Ely, is just over here, that's another mile. The normal road you would take, you'd go down this road and then go along a long straight road that way. But there is a small road goes through here. It's a bit of a bumpy road, so most locals don't use it. And this picture is just the same, just further round, so you can see how straight the roads are. Now you might be able to see this better than I. Over here is Littleport, there's Ely. It's the same photograph you just saw really, but I've just darkened it up. But in the distance, this couple, it's a brother and a sister. They were quite elderly. They had gone to see their sister who was poorly in a home in Mildenhall. They were coming back, and they were coming past that house you just saw a moment ago. And in the distance, they saw a bright bluey white light just there. And he described it in an instant. He said there was no sensation of speed other than it was gone past them as quick as that. And that's pretty much what it looked like. I tried to, with my limited skills on not PowerPoint, on the art program, to get something like he described, and he said that's the best it looks, what he can recall. So a blink of an eye, it flashed past them about 45 degrees. Now this man is an aeroplane buff. He goes plane spotting, and I'm not saying he knows everything about aeroplanes, but he's well into his aeroplanes. And he sits outside Lakenheath looking at all the fighter bombers, Mildenhall and various other ones around the area. He said, I've never seen a plane that travels that fast. He said it was about the size of a fist outside of his car as it flew past. Flying is, I use the term flying, but of course who knows what it's doing. It's technically not flying possibly. It was sharp light, it illuminated the house as it went by and all the fields. It was like the light was illuminating the fields, and in an instant it was behind him. He did sound on this occasion, there was a sound like a siren. I said, can you be more specific? He said, but you know the siren that you used to hear in the Second World War, where it built up and it became loud? It was just like that, but it petered off as it went past, which was a little bit unusual and different. So as it went past, here again an instant, he looked in his rear view mirror, and it had travelled behind him, and when it was quite small, it just shot straight up into the sky and disappeared. And he saw nothing of it, no more of it after that. The only downside was I couldn't get his sister to verify it because she'd since died. But once again, the man's got no reason to lie, and he seemed to tell his story quite consistently all the way through. But that was his story at Mildenhall Road, just down the road from where I lived, about 4 miles away. This is an interesting one with some orbs. It's a two-part story, really, on 2 separate occasions. And the first one was 2001 and happened just north of Peterborough. Peterborough's here. It's RAF Wittering. It's been the home of several different aircraft. In more recent times, the Harrier jump jet. There's been helicopters based there and all sorts. And the second one was down here. And strangely enough, that one was only happened about a few hundred yards away from RAF Wittering, and this one happened about a mile or two from RAF Alconbury, which is an American base. Wittering is a UK base, that's American. It's pretty much gone now. There are some Americans there still, but not many, and it's mainly a big industrial area now, but it was a big deal in its day. So this couple, they were backpacking basically. They just had a week walking around and what have you. And they just had all day walking 30 miles from Peterborough, and it's the surrounding countryside. And they were looking for a place to get. It was getting dark, and they came upon. Okay, I'm just looking for a little red button. Collie Western Great Wood, which is next to RAF Wittering. Now, there's RAF Wittering all there. That's obviously the runway. This is the A1, the Great North Road, travelling north to south, and This is the A47, which is a major trunk road going past here, and literally the other side of the two gates that go onto the airfield, there's Collie Weston Great Wood just there. It's quite interesting, this place. It's open, then it's decommissioned, then it's open again, but they never leave it unattended. On this particular occasion, when this happened, it had been decommissioned, and apart from a few guards and whatever, there's nothing else there. No airplanes, no helicopters. I know the base very well, because for several months, over here is where the Harrier jump jets, over here and here, used to refuel. And I had the job of spraying these underground fuel tanks out with the special stuff. And you'd sit outside having a lunch break, and these Harriers were landing literally where the bar is, right next to us. Fascinating, it really was. None more for that. Collie Weston Great Wood. That's where they decided to pitch and camp up for the night. Literally the other side from the airbase. They didn't realise at the time, but they were going to be sleeping right next to the Cold War munitions dump, storage dump. It's a massive place. They saw all the barbed wire fence. It was almost dark, and they could see some buildings in there. And they pitched up the tent, and they was just nattering, basically getting ready to go to bed. It was around about 11 o'clock, he told me, when between the trees in the distance over here, here we go. They saw a bright orange light which basically came to the fence almost again in an instant. They estimated it just hovered there for a few seconds, very much like this. And once again, this is something I've made, and I've sent it to him. I said, was it anything like this? He said, that's it. He said, that's exactly how it was. He said, it had a texture, a little bit like an orange. It didn't seem to be stable. It seemed to be sort of moving a little bit. And although the edges were fairly defined, they weren't crisp. It was almost like there was a haze around it. About 10 to 15 feet across, they were shocked. They just froze where they stood for a few seconds because they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Then whether it was showing off or what, they both ran toward it. And they said they could hear no sound from this thing. All they heard was the crunching of the leaves and the twigs and what have you beneath their feet. But as they approached the fence, it just vanished into thin air. They assumed it went upwards because there was this blur shape going upwards, but he couldn't confirm it went upwards. But that's where they thought it went, and it just disappeared. Within the next 4 minutes, though, the sky was alive with other activity. Within seconds of this thing shooting up in the sky, there's a helicopter flying overhead. He said, I don't know my helicopters, but it was a military helicopter. It wasn't one with a little bobble on. It was, you know, it looked like a military thing. And it was just going round and round. And within the 4 minutes, and possibly a little bit later, he can't be precise, but there was a jet aircraft circling the airbase as well. And once again, these things were there almost in an instant, and it seems almost like they knew they were going to be there. They were almost waiting. They didn't know the exact spot. And I've heard this so much over the years, in America, Russia, Europe, and recently, guys who come from your neck of the woods come and talk to us about the Penturk incident, and it almost seems like they were there waiting for that thing to turn up. So whether there's some way that they know that these things are going to turn up at certain times, at certain places or not, I don't know. But it does seem quite suspicious. And this was one of those instances. So they knew something wasn't right, and the ball of light was just unexplainable. They just didn't know what to say about it. And that's a bit more about what it looked like there. They said they wasn't frightened when it was there. They said, strangely, it was almost comforting. And what's strange is I hear that from lots of people who see these things. And I myself, when I had the hairs on the back of my neck, I could feel them tingling, I wasn't afraid. And once again, that's a good word. It was almost comforting. It was almost like an old friend. Anyway, a little bit about the bomb dump that they parked themselves beside. It's a massive area. It was built in 55 as a remote weapons store. And I've talked to an RF guy who was on there, and he told me that well, he's on Wittering, not there, and he said they built them just off base and whatever, so if something went up, there was less likelihood of it damaging the airbase. It was just away from major centres of population. The airfield changed use over several years, from a fighter station to bomber command station. They had helicopters there at one point. It was decommissioned, then reused, And as I say, the time when this happened, it was decommissioned, although there was definitely guards there at the time. They had two kinds of bunkers on there, and these are they. Where's the bit? There we go. Some of them had soil all over top, and they looked much more heavily sort of protected in some way, very similar to the ones I told you where they made the nuclear bombs. Then they had these sort of huts that didn't seem to have much protection at all. It's been the venue for a couple of raves over the years, with a massive amount of people there. Lots of bits and bobs have been nicked off there. Nearly all the metal has gone for scrap and what have you, things that they could take away. And what's really weird is, though, the grass is still, I wouldn't say it's kept like a lawn, but it's cut fairly regular. So somebody's still got an interest in there. And who that is, I don't know. So that's the end of that little story, but that's a two-parter, as I say. And so that happened near Peterborough, RAF Wittering. This next one was a few years later, and it's the same couple in actual fact, and I think they are married by now. It happened in 2018. It was, so it's very, very recent, 10 p.m. The same couple were driving down this road here, which is a nothing road, and the road that goes across the back here is the B660, and over here somewhere is RAF Elconbury. And they were travelling down here, they were going to turn right, there's a little village here, they turn left and go down the other side of those pylons, if you can see them. But just about there somewhere, as they was coming down, they see this, what looked like an orange ball in the distance. And they spoke about it and remembered about what they'd seen in the woods and was recalling the incident. They said this time the brightness was really vivid, but it seemed to be pulsating this time. They were obviously glued on it. They travelled down this road, and that's pretty much what they saw. Here again, this is something I've made. I sent it to him. He said that's about the size, and that's the position it was in. So at least the positioning and everything. Now I have to say at this point, they did take a photograph, but that wasn't. It wasn't. Sorry, it was not a photograph. It was a bit of footage. But because they was travelling in the car and the camera, you can imagine what it was like. You see them on the internet all the time, and it was totally useless. I mean, yes, they filmed something, but it could have been anything. So to demonstrate what it looked like, I've made this, but I have seen the footage. There we go. So they followed it toward this village called Saltree. The light became unbelievably bright now. It was pulsating and kept getting brighter. They said they pulled over into a nearby field entrance, which I'll show you in a minute, and they could see it moving parallel to them, but across around about 4 to 5 fields away, their side of these pylons I told you about. And then they said, just like in 2001, it just seemed to blink out. They said it didn't seem to go anywhere. It just blinked out. This is the gateway where they saw it, so to give you an idea of where we're at. The road they first saw it was right over the other side. Those trees in the distance there, not these ones in the distance, it was this side of those trees. When they came down that side road, they came up here through the village, down another little lane like the one you just saw, and they saw it going down here. And somewhere between these two pylons, it just blinked out. And they said you could still see the tops of the pylons silhouetted against the sky. It was a clear night, and he said, I can't be sure it was those two pylons, but I think it was. So that's the end of that story. Now, this is quite an interesting one. A couple of young ladies who are living together have a two-part sighting, and the first one is here at Downham Market, and the second one here at Outwell. Downham Market, it's another small market town, and on this particular occasion, at 1 o'clock, she looked at the clock when she got up, and she said, 1 o'clock. One of them gets up to get a glass of water, and she walks through to the kitchen, which is literally just a few feet away. She knew she walked in the dark, and almost immediately she walked in the room. This is what happened. Suddenly it lit up, and there was 3 bright white lights. Now she's seen this picture, or they both have, because they both saw this. And they said it wasn't quite like that, it was a lot brighter, but I've just put this on here to illustrate it, was a lot brighter. And the whole room was just brilliant white, so white, it almost bled everything out. She said, you know, it was almost like you couldn't see any detail of anything. She said they looked like some kind of headlights on a car about 8 feet away. But afterwards they said, well, it couldn't have been a car because A, there's just a parking space and then there's fields. Not only that, they live on the first floor flat. And then we got talking about it, and they'd been doing their own research since, and she said it was very similar to that scene in Close Encounters where Richard Dreyfuss is sitting at the railway crossing and the thing's behind him and goes up. She said it's very similar to that. But after what seemed ages, but was a second or two, this red light came on. It seemed to be scanning the whole place. But all this happened in just seconds. And then she tried to get a picture on her phone, but it failed. She couldn't get the thing to work. Her hand was shaking. She couldn't get a picture. Later that same evening, when she was messing around with it, she came to the conclusion that her battery was just fried. If you recall Alan's friend's encounter, the battery was fried. Well, perhaps there's a similar thing going on here. Who knows? So without warning, this thing backed off to what they estimated 40 feet away and just slowly moved away. Well, these two girls were quite young. They're just teenagers, really, but they were freaked out by it all, and they were crying, they were panicking and what have you, trying to rationalise the whole thing. And they obviously didn't get any conclusion. There still is no real conclusion to it all. But by now they were wide awake, and they soon realised that when they looked at the clock, and one of them said, "It's 2 o'clock," and the other one said, "So?" She said, "Well, I looked at the clock when I got up just 3 or 4 minutes ago, and it was 1 o'clock." So they say they lost an hour of time. So they made a cup of tea, there's been a bit of toast, and then they realised the toaster didn't work anymore. So that ended up in the skip. Whether there's any connection or not, who knows? But I've shoved it in there just that there may be a connection. But what is interesting, one said to the other one, she said, "Oh my goodness," she said, "look, you have a red rash on your neck, and look at your shoulders, there's this big V mark on her shoulder." Now, it was took by the other one's phone that was still working. It was in her bedroom, and they're not very good pictures, but this is the girl, and you can just make out a little bit here, but I black and whited it and changed the contrast, and you can see it a bit more there. But I showed them both the picture of Ros Reynolds, the one I showed you earlier. I showed them that picture, and the girl said that's exactly what it looked like, but it was further up her neck, and you can just make it out there. So while she was taking this photograph, she's bending over. While this one's bending over, she said, "My goodness," she said, "look at your feet." And when she looked down, her feet, they'd just got up out of bed. Her feet were filthy dirty, like she just walked through a muddy field, and there was blood on both feet. And they took a picture of that as well. And that's the picture of the feet. So there's all mud over her feet, as though she's been walking outside in the mud, and there was blood, and her other foot had got blood all round here as well. I had to ask a question. There's no chance that this could have been a womanly thing going on here? She said no. So it wasn't that. Now this freaked them out a lot, and in actual fact night times they couldn't sleep and they was having all sorts of problems, so they asked the council to move them. They moved them to a village about 5 or 6, 8 miles away, something like that, called Outwell. Funnily enough, it's the village where if you looked outside my bungalow where I lived, it was about 20 miles away. That's where they lived. However, things didn't stop. They've seen UFOs on several occasions. I'm going to show you a bit of footage in a minute. But they haven't seen the solid lights that they saw on that particular night anymore, but they've seen other lights in the sky. And sometimes they see this, and it's usually in the middle of the night after midnight, and they've sometimes seen it shooting straight up in the sky in an instant. That's how they described it. Now, got a bit of footage here I'm going to play. Now, I'm telling you now, when I saw it, I thought, this is just a hot air balloon. Because believe it or not, although I do believe something's going on, I know something's going on. But I am quite sceptical when I investigate these cases. I try to eliminate everything I can possibly think of. They filmed this, and I thought, that's a hot air balloon. They assure me that that's the object they see on a regular basis, sometimes in the day, but usually at night. And this is the same object that shoots up in the sky. And I was quite sceptical until I had a chat with their neighbours to see if they'd seen anything. And they said, yeah, we've had a barbecue here one night, and it was late, it was dark, and there was 12 of us stood and watched this thing come along exactly like that. It was illuminated, and it shot up in the sky. So take out of this what you feel, but it looks, and I know you won't see it very close here, but this looks very much to me like a hot air balloon. And this is taken out of the kitchen window. This is, I don't know if you can see it, but it's just in there. It doesn't appear to move at all, and it didn't shoot up in the sky. It just seemed to stand there for ages. It didn't get any bigger, it got no smaller, and there's about 10 minutes worth of video. And obviously it ain't putting it on because nothing else happens. But they assure me that's what goes up in the sky, and the neighbours have said they've seen it go up in the sky, albeit night times. And that's pretty much the end of that. They've seen some strange apparitions and things like that, which I won't go into, not now, but they're certainly a troubled couple, I will just put it like that. So we're going to go down the M11 now to Stansted, and this is quite an interesting sighting with another regression. And in case you're not aware of where Stansted is, I mean, there's Cambridge, I live just about there, London's down here, Southend, what we spoke about earlier, down here. So this is the M11 going down here in Stansted, and the airport is just there. A close-up map for you. And this particular incident happened November 2014. It was around about 7:30, and this woman, who is now a group member, had her 2 children with her. One child I think was 8 or 10 years old, it'll perhaps say on here, I can't recall, and the other one was about 14, 15. And they was with her. She'd picked one of them up from Amazon Dramatics or something. They'd come down this road here. Now this is the M11, London's down here, Cambridge up there. And there's a big service area here. It's quite a massive service area. Over here is the car park areas for the airport, and the airport is over here. This is the flight line where you often see jets coming into land across this road here. I don't know if it's the only way they land, but there's certainly a lot of travel along there. And this lady is well aware, she only lives about 5 miles from here, so she's well aware of what the aeroplanes look like that fly across the road. On this night, she was travelling around the roundabouts on this huge roundabout round here and going down the slip road to enter the M11. Now about here there was a boggy area. It's all grown up now, and even when the next photographs were taken it was more grown up than it was at the time. But with her 2 children, she travelled round a roundabout going down the slip road, and here's a picture of the slip road going down, and she looked to the left because there was something caught her eye, and she said, "My God, what's that?" And the 2 kids looked over. The oldest one freaked out a little bit, but the youngest one said, "Oh, don't worry, it's just a UFO," as if you see these things every day. It was motionless, it hovered here, and it was a dark gunmetal colour. And this is pretty much what the shape looked like. We're going to get an artist, get a better rendition of what it looked like fairly soon, but this is the best we've got at the moment. All 3 drew pictures separately from one another, and they all drew the exact same shape, and I've talked to them all, and they all gave the same story separately from one another. The mother has been regressed, but the children haven't yet. She's not told them the story, what she found out on her regression, and when they're ready, she's said to, when you're ready, we'll have some regression done here, but only when they're ready, because at the moment they're both still a bit freaked out with it all. They all said it was around about the size of 2 to 3 tennis courts in size. They don't recall any sound whatsoever. One described it as dart-shaped, and the other one described it as a Chinese throwing dart, if that means anything to you. So, looking at it from the side, they said it had a boat-like belly to the bottom of it, and there was a light in each corner coming down, and a light going through the middle. Strangely enough, I've seen this shape elsewhere, and I've got a picture off the internet. Whether it's a made-up picture or not, I don't know, but it's almost identical to this, other than the cutaways, which were quite interesting. Where didn't that go? There we go. This is the picture I found on the internet, and I've shown them, and they said that's just the shape they saw, other than theirs had a cutaway, and that light wasn't red. So it was blue-white light in the corners, and an electric blue swirling light in the middle. And the swirling lights they described as looking like those lampshades, which is what this is indeed. But instead of being static, she said it was almost as though it was like a net spinning round. And that's how they described what all the lights looked like. So we've got the hypnotic regression, and it'd be interesting if you can remember what the other regression was like. Bear in mind, neither of these two people had any interest in UFOs whatsoever. This lady spends a lot of time with her kids, and she's got no time to look into this stuff, which she does now, but she didn't then. And their stories are almost identical. The first one, they were looking, she said they were harvesting eggs. This time, the conclusion is slightly different, but almost everything else is identical. Once again, I'm sorry, but I'm just going to have to take the microphone off.
Ready to do the bits?
Just going upwards.
I'm going upwards. How are you going upwards?
It just feels like I'm floating.
You're floating.
Just in the light.
In the light.
I'm in the light.
Okay.
We're all in the light.
And your daughters as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see the car.
You can see the car below you?
Yeah.
Okay. And how did you move through the car?
Just through the roof, I don't know. Just went up.
How do you feel in this moment?
Like I'm flying in the big space. Standing now.
Where are you standing?
Next to a slab thing, just to lay down.
Okay. Do they ask you to lay down?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you understand them?
Yeah.
And how do they communicate with you?
My head.
In your head. And how do they look to you?
Their whole body's a big head. Big eyes.
Is there anything now that you notice about them that you hadn't noticed before?
Long fingers.
Do you know how many fingers they've got?
3.
3. What do their fingers look like?
It's very long with a black bobble sort of on the end.
And what does the slab look like?
Silvery grey, shiny.
Shiny. Do you know what it's made of?
I think it's like some kind of metal. It looks like it should be cold, but it doesn't feel cold.
Okay. Are you wearing your clothes still?
Yes.
And are the girls still in the same room?
Yes.
On the slab.
Jade's there.
Is that another one of your daughters?
Yeah, she's walking.
She's walking?
Yeah, she's walking over.
Was she in the car with you?
No.
She wasn't in the car with you. Do you know why she's there then? Or how she got there?
It's just standing with sisters, and she has a small being, whatever it is, with her.
A small being with her? Like the ones that you were seeing, the same. So she's got a small being with her. How does she appear? Does she appear scared or does she appear okay? Or?
She's okay.
Do you talk to each other at all?
She's just, don't know, I think she's trying to tell them something. They're moving. They're all going.
You're going?
No, they're going.
They're going?
She's going with some of the beings.
Some of the beings are going with him, you said?
Jade and the girls are getting off the bed. The slab thing. She's just taking her sisters away.
She's taking her sisters away? To a different part?
Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously there's a lot more to that, but I realise we've just got one night here tonight. Did you find most of those elements that she was talking about were almost identical to what Gwen was talking about earlier? I've played part of this and relayed it to Susie Hansen, and once again, for those who know of her book, The All Soul Connection, and all her experiences and what have you, and she says, I feel sure that the image of this woman's oldest daughter, there in the distance, yeah, is a screen memory. It's either one of them that's made to look like her daughter, or it's just a memory that they've put in her head to have her relaxed. And she said, I've seen this, in actual fact it's quoted in her book, that very often when you go up, there's some small greys take you off and you go for lessons and tutorials and all sorts of stuff. And she said, I'm sure that, she said, what you've just said is identical and she said, I've got it in the book. She said, you can read it, and I have done, and it is in the book. So whether that was I'm in the case or not, I don't know. The only real difference was she was told she could keep her clothes on, and whereas the other one she hadn't. And the only thing that's not very accurate on here is the slab that she was laying on. Although the top looks very similar, she said it was almost like it was solid all the way down to the floor, but I couldn't find one of those pictures on the internet, I'm afraid. Anyway, that was the end of the story, although in Q&A I've got an awful amount I can tell you about the family. There's a lot of weird things been going on, but I won't go on about it now. But a lot of weird stuff which relates to what you've just seen as well. This next one's a real shorty for you. He's a group member. He became a group member after this sighting, and it wasn't until he was relaying this story when his wife said, well, I've seen strange things, and she told me about stories when she was 8 years old with her parents seeing a UFO chasing the car, which I won't be going into tonight. But just to give you a bit of an idea, and the reason I put this in, it's so close to some very famous places. I mean, here's Rendlesham Forest. You've got the Aldborough incident, which I put on another presentation, which happened just before the First World War. You have lots of instances of green and red lights under the water, some of them coming out of the water. I did a talk in a prison just down here, a Category A prison, which is just about there somewhere. And many of the guards and they're not called inmates now, I can't think what they call them, but it's something more user-friendly, have seen these things coming out of the water. Also, for those that are aware of Taurus, help me somebody.
Milton Fog. Milton Fog, isn't it?
What?
Milton Fog.
No, there's an American fighter pilot, I can't remember, Milton Taurus, came along here, and he was sent to vector in along with another guy to intercept this huge UFO. He locked on and nothing happened, and it was all on radar and everything, and he'd been sent from the US base, but it would have been authorised by the UK authorities. That all happened just off this coast as well. Loads of stuff been going on here, and that's why I'm putting this in, although the story here in itself isn't that dynamic really. But this is his house. He wants his address to be kept quiet, which is not a problem. But it's about 8:30 at night. He knows the date because his wife and 2 children had gone out trick-or-treating, and he was at home on his own, and he decided to have a cigarette. He wasn't allowed to smoke in the house, so he went to the back door, which is just the other side of that gate there, if you can see it, and he was smoking. He just happened to look up in this starlit sky. This is not the starlit sky. I actually put that in myself to just give you an idea what it looked like. And what came gliding, he called it over. He called it flying for a start, but then he changed it. He said it wasn't really flying like an airplane. It was very slow and it was almost gliding. He originally called it a triangle shape, but when I nailed him on it a bit more, it was more like a triangle boomerang type shape. And I found some shapes off the internet, sent them to him. I said, are any of these? And this is pretty much what he said he saw. He said he assumed it was about the size of a passenger jet. It moved with an almost gliding appearance. He said it was silent. It had 5 red lights, just as you can see here. It was dark in colour, dark grey or possibly black, and it travelled the way the apex was facing. So when he first saw it, this is pretty much what he saw just here. And it just glided over it and went toward. He said if it kept going on that direction, because I showed him a map, we got the compass out and various other bits and bobs, and it would have flown right over Rendlesham Forest. Whether there's any connection, probably not, but it would have gone over Rendlesham Forest and out to sea. He said, I see lots of aircraft here because I think they've got helicopters just down the road and there's other planes go by. He said, but I've never seen anything like that. The whole thing only lasted 25 to 35 seconds until it went off into the distance. But in the morning, his wife noticed on his back he got some strange marks, and he'd also got the same strange marks on his arm. And this is a photograph she took at the time. Here again, whether there's any relevance to it or not, I don't know. And this is the photograph she took. Moving on to another double event. This time it's at Willingham, just here. It's another orb event. And where the parachute sighting was just there earlier in the first presentation. And in between this sighting and that's where them parachutes he said he saw. So it's right next to that airbase, what was. And the second one's down at DUXFORD again, the exact same spot where we spoke about earlier. A lot of these are near air bases, but then again, you travel 5 miles in any direction in East Anglia and you'll find an air base, so it's hardly surprising. He went outside to have a cigarette. Whoops, that's the wrong guy. Just had to be done, didn't it?
Smoking man.
Yeah. So there he is. He's outside having a cigarette. And he looks around about 30 degrees up, he puts it, and he saw a group of very bright lights in a triangle shape. It was still dark. And he said, that's where it starts to get interesting, he said, it's almost like they started dancing. He said they was going round one another. And I asked him to describe the things. This is basically, he was actually standing just the other side of this bush. I wanted to go and photograph him there, but when I went there, there was a big ugly dog there, and he weren't liking me very much, so I took the photograph from the road. But this is pretty much what he saw. He said it was huge in front of him. He said they looked just like oranges. He said, but a little bit brighter than an orange, and also a little bit more red than an orange. He said, but he said, and it had a texture of an orange. He said, and although it was quite clear and crisp, he said the outside looked a little bit fuzzy. And I thought, where have I heard this before? Several times. Anyway, it was a triangle shape, and he was just looking at this. Oh, wrong button. He said there were 7 of them. He said they were much bigger than the stars in the sky at the time. He said they ended up, they made a horizontal line. There was no sound. And he said he ran upstairs to get his wife. She came down in a hurry with her phone, and she did take a short video clip. And once again, I have seen the video clip. And once again, I mean, people say to me, why don't people take photographs and videos of this stuff? Well, people do, but unfortunately they use phones. They zoomed into infinity, and all you get is little blobs which could be anything, and you blow them up and there's just about 6 pixels there, which basically tell you very little. That was another case, but I have seen the video, and the date marries up with when he said he saw this as well. So the second sighting they had was down the DUXFORD. So here's DUXFORD on the right, and there's some of the hangars, it was dark. They were going shopping somewhere around London, one of those big shopping areas there. He said this big bright ball of white light this time, almost bright like magnesium, like something really powerful, was burning away. It disappeared and then reappeared the other side of the road, and it did this a couple of times. And they just went past. I asked them if there was other cars on the road. He said, I think so, but he couldn't really recall, to be honest. And there was nothing else seemed to happen. I said, was you late getting there where he was going? He couldn't recall. So it pretty much, the trail ran cold at that time. A lot of these sightings I've shown you, I have spoken to airfields and lots of people doing the research if there's anything gone on, and they all say no. I told you earlier we was going to be visiting Chatras, this little sleepy town which seems to be a bed of activity. It really does. And Chatras, if you recall, the man who saw the parachutes working there, he went through Cottenham there, and he went all this way up to here to Chatras. That's where he lived, about 20 miles away. This first one is an elderly lady that lives on her own. She's close to 80 years old. She's as bright as a button. Even now, she's learning another language. She speaks fluently 3 other languages. She's really sharp. She's got all her faculties. And she said, I'll tell you all my stories. There's another one which I won't share with you tonight, which happened somewhere else. And there's 2 here. She said, I'll tell you my stories, providing you never mention my name or my address, she said, because I don't want them carting me off because they think I'm Gaga, as she put it. So she's a very posh lady, but I believe every word she's saying. Anyway, she sleeps in a bedroom that's just here somewhere. Forget that for the moment, but that's where the second sighting is. And what we're now going to be looking at is in this area here. You probably can't see them very well, but there's a couple of big trees and some smaller trees in her back garden. And from there to there, it's no distances from here to the bar. She sleeps most of the time with her window wide open, which she did on this particular night. And she sleeps with the blinds, which you can see there wide open as well, because she likes to see the sky and what have you, the stars. And there's the view of the trees I mentioned. This particular night, she woke up quite suddenly, and she said it was almost purposeful. It was almost like I meant to wake up and look out the window. She said I'd done it instantly without looking, and it was almost like somebody instructed me to. Whether they did or not, who knows. But This is what she saw. She looked out the window beside her bed. This is still looking out a window. That's not a very good rendition of it. It's just me to show you where it was and the scale of it. And she said, there's this thing that looked like an upturned boat. This is actually a picture that she did. She drew this. And she said, all this area was in a fluffy cloud. There was no clouds about that night, except for this cloud. And it was covering the trees. She couldn't see those trees. And it was all around here, this cloud. She said, and it was going into the cloud. She said, and I thought, this thing's going to crash into those trees. She said, but it kept going in, and it didn't crash into the trees. Nothing else other than that. She said, when it went in, the cloud just dispersed, and there was nothing else. What she did say is that it was a dull silvery looking. The side looked like the planking on a boat, and the back, although it looked like planking, it had a three-dimensional look to it, almost like a padded area, but it looked solid. A little sort of doorway type thing here, she said, but it wasn't a door, but it looked a bit like a doorway. And these skids, what she presumed was skids underneath. And that's the best description she could give me, but it looks pretty good. But it just went into this cloud, disappeared, and then the cloud disappeared, right outside her bedroom window. I know what you're going to say, she could be dreaming. Well, she could be, but I don't know. But that's what she likened it to, something like that. She said there was no sound, and she said it just disappeared. But she did have another sighting in the lounge. Here we go. This is a picture taken from her lounge. Now, obviously, her lounge isn't illuminated here, but I'm just showing what's outside there. So she lives on this little cul-de-sac, and just about there was this orangey red orb, and she looked up. She was reading. She looked up and attracted to the window. She saw the orange orb. She had a mottled texture, and she described it looking a little like a Scotch egg. Well, doesn't that look a little bit like an orange that we've been hearing about earlier? She said it was about the size of a saucer, about 5 inches in diameter. Now, when I was there, I looked behind where she was sitting to see if there was any reflections in the glass, if there was any standby lights on or anything, all the sorts of stuff. There's nothing there. It's just a bookcase with nothing. There's no reflected surfaces at all. She said it just sat there for a few seconds. She said it was almost as though it was looking at her, but that's obviously just what she said. And it just blinked out. I said, are you sure it didn't go in one way or another? She said, well, it just disappeared, just like that. So that was her two sightings. There was a third in another place, but I've not put that on here. But we're still in Chatteris, and on this occasion there was a few witnesses, 2 children, a mother, and a guy who lived next door. It was slightly grey and overcast on the day when this happened, but when they saw what they called the UFO, it had brightened up by then. They was going to have a barbecue in the shared back garden. And within a little while, this big hot air balloon goes over the house, quite low, and at about the time it's going over, within them few 15-20 minutes, the sun come out and it soon brightened up. They said there was very little wind because the hot air balloon took an age to go over top of the houses. But it had been gone a little while, and they was getting the barbecue all lit, when one of the children said, the balloon's back. And they saw something like this, and the neighbour said, can you see it to the guy? And he said, oh yes. And they're looking at it, and they described it as like a spot in the sky. It shows it as overcast here, but they assure me that it was quite clear on the day. This is just something I've put together. These are the actual, this is taken from the back garden, but that's something I've put down there. But once again, I've showed the 2 children, the mother and the man, this picture. I said, is that what the thing looked like? And they all agree that's exactly what they saw. She tried to film it on her phone, but she couldn't seem to get it to focus in. When she did show me, she showed me the picture of it, but it's all fuzzy and out of focus again, and so a waste of time putting on here really to show you. Well, one of them said it was the blackest thing, as the woman says, the blackest thing she's ever seen in the sky. It was almost like there was a hole in the sky. Although it was relatively clear, it was a round circular object. She said it had a fuzzy look around the outside of it, which I've tried to simulate on there. They said when it left, I said, so how did it leave? She said, went upwards. I said, quickly, slowly? She said, just slowly. She said, it just seemed to go up and up and up. She said, and in a minute or so, or whatever it was, he said it just disappeared. The guy said it was hard to judge its size, but he thinks it was bigger than it looked somehow. How we can know that, I don't know. He unsettled all of them quite a bit. The kids were crying, the mother was crying, even he was having a few tears, he said, and because none of them really believed in flying saucers. So they did contact a local balloon ride company and see if their balloon that went over top, to see if there was anybody there who saw this thing. And they never got back, basically, and when I tried to follow it up, the balloon company had disappeared. They're either on a liquidation or just ceased trading. Okay, nearly there. We're back to LITTLEPORT now, and I won't show you where it is because you know that already. Right, the guy who saw the white light come from LITTLEPORT over here and it went by in an instant, that's where he was. There's the little lane go down beside there, there's the long straight road. And I lived over here when I saw mine looking that way. This guy's the other side of the village. Now this man I've known almost all my life. He's quite a bit older than me, so he's pretty ancient. He's a fossil, he really is. But one thing, he's as genuine as the day is long. I've never known him to lie, exaggerate. He's what we call an old fen boy. He lives a simple life, but he knows what he sees, and he's that sort of guy. He lives down a country lane. This is where he lives, small bungalow, and that's where he was sleeping with his wife on this particular evening. They have net up the windows, and although they have curtains, they're not lined, but they are very, very thick. And on this particular night they was asleep, and all of a sudden this bright white light, remembering what the two girls saw earlier, lit up the whole room. And he said, and it woke his wife as well, and he said, I've never seen a light like it. We said, we have cars turning round occasionally in the gateway opposite, which I'll show you in a moment. He said, but I've never seen them look like that. He said, almost, some of the bits and pieces on their cupboards, he said, you almost couldn't make out what they were. He said, it was almost like the whole room was white. Scared them quite a bit. He got up to go to the window, and when he got up, the light went out, just blinked straight out. So, this is where it all happened, looking out of his bedroom window. It's a bit foggy in places because I've got this picture through glass. There's houses going up here now, but the gateway is just here somewhere. So when they back in there and come round, it shines a light in their window. There's only one more house past the bungalow, so the road doesn't go anywhere. So it's usually people that mistakenly took the wrong turn and gone down there, and it doesn't happen very often. So I'm going to darken this picture up in a minute and tell you what he saw. Now I'll just describe what he saw. He said there was 5 what looked like starfish coming down out of the sky. He said, and they didn't quite touch my front garden. There's his fence, and he's got a small garden at the front here. They didn't hit the ground, but they came down in his garden. He said they looked a bit like a starfish, like the stars you see flying off a sparkler. He said that's exactly what they looked like, and they were golden in colour. And I said, was they travelling very fast or slow? He said, like a man jogging, something like that. It wasn't really fast, but it was, you know, you couldn't hardly keep up with it. I was thinking shooting star or something like that, although I've never seen or know of anyone who's seen one or more than one land this close to the ground or anything and still see it. Perhaps they do, I don't know. This guy has lived in the middle of the fens all his life. He's a farmer boy. He knows all the natural stuff that goes around. And I said, have you ever seen a shooting star that looks like this? He said, never. He said, they weren't shooting stars, but what they were, I don't know. But we did do an impression of what they looked like, and he said, that's pretty damn close to what they looked like. And this is what he saw out of his bedroom window. He said the 4 of them, 5 of them, 4 of them, by the looks of it here, came down, and just before it hit the ground, they just phased out. He said, and you could follow them down, it was going that slow. He said, and when they blinked out, he said there was another one travelled along there on a parallel, on a horizontal path, and that just blinked out as well when it got about 30-40 feet away, and it looked something like that. It didn't have a trail. That's me putting on just to show you the sort of trajectory and what have you. But that's pretty much what they looked like. Starfish, and it sparkled a bit like a sparkler. What it was, I don't know. I'm still saying they were meteors, but I've never known a meteor to look like that. There we go. This next one is another group member. He travels around as a salesman, and he was travelling between two villages, not far from Haverhill. That's somewhere there where we saw that Ross Reynolds thingy. It's just down the road a piece, Linton and another small village, Hildisham. And there's a road going around the back of the village, and the road's called Back Road, and that's where he was travelling. This is the road, so he's travelling in that direction. Hildisham's over here, this is on the edge of Linton. And he just glances up, and he sees what looks a bit like a silver cigar. No windows, no wings, no visible form of propulsion. It was a blue sky with a few clouds in. He's told me that there probably wasn't quite as many clouds as there are in this picture, but there were clouds about, and it looked similar to that. And he looked at this object for about 20-30 seconds, and he said it was just going into this cloud. It was just travelling into this cloud. And it reminded me of the lady from Chatteris we just saw, where the thing went into the cloud, and he said, just like the lady did, it never came out the other side. And here again, it's just something we've made up, but that's pretty much what he saw. He said it was a silvery object, as I say, no tail, wings or anything like that, went into the cloud. 3 times the length of a passenger aircraft, he estimated, because he knows where Hildisham is, and he used to work on aircraft at Marshall's Airfield, so he's got a bit of an idea of scale of aircraft and what have you. But, and he knows how high clouds are and that sort of thing. No noise, completely silent, he said. Thank you. That's it. So I'm open for questions if anybody's got any questions.